when the Julian calendar started, it had 8 days. It was an 8-day week. As you can see in this this picture that I have here of a Roman calendar, ancient Roman calendar, and the letters go from A to H. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is an 8-day calendar week that the Romans had under Julius Caesar, and that calendar was all messed up. That it was so bad that the different seasons were like the winter months were falling in the summer, so it was all jacked up. So this guy Julius Caesar, he had to consult with I believe he was an astronomer slash mathematician, something to that effect. His name was Sosigenes, which Elder Gabar did a lesson on, and he brought out about Julius Caesar and Sosigenes. He mentioned them in the one article he was reading. So I had looked up some research. I did a little research, and I found out, that is correct. I just wanted to get it for myself. So the Romans, when they first set up the calendar, it was an 8-week calendar. So basically, just from that point alone, the whole calendar is totally off and messed up. So why would you follow that calendar? Then the brother Ariala from Texas, he sent me a video on my phone, which I just posted up on GMSinfo channel, where it goes into the origins of the Julian calendar, and how it was all jacked up, and I just posted it up on GMSinfo channel. The guy says Yahushua and Yahuwah, which are not the names of the Lord, Yahweh and Yahweh Shai. But the point is, the information on the history, that's the reason why I posted the calendar up. Alright, so what I'm going to do in this lesson, I'm going to go into the origins of, because see, we already established pretty much that the Julian calendar / Gregorian calendar today is all jacked up. It doesn't follow the scriptures, in the book of Genesis, the first chapter, on how to count days, so on and so forth. So already that's out the door. But in this lesson, once the calendar was reformed, which Sosigenes helped Julius Caesar reform the calendar, so to speak. They established, a 7-day week, and the names of the week were named after the gods in the heavens. All right, such as Saturn, and the moon, the sun, Thursday, Friday, and all of that. All of those names were all named after Roman gods. All right. So what happened was, once that was established, because in 46 BC, that was known as a year of the confusion of the calendar, or something to that effect, because that calendar in 46 BC was so messed up. The calendar was messed up before, it was messed up on 46 BC, and it was messed up after anyway. But it was so jacked up that they called it the year of confusion. Alright, so in this lesson, once they established that calendar, that was a calendar that the Israelites were following. And when I mean by Israelites, not the Israelites that were in Jerusalem during the time of Yahweh Shai, but the Israelites that took over the pagan Roman Empire and so-called made it into the Holy Roman Empire, such as Constantine, and the rest of those, Sylvester, Pope Sylvester, and the rest of those popes, pontifices, leaders, cardinals, and what have you. All right. So what happened was, when you go up in the history, around the 500, towards the late 500 BC, which is the 6th century, towards the late 6th century BC, there was a man by the name of Archbishop Martin of Braga, which Braga is in Portugal. All right, and what he did was, which I'm going to read a little excerpts from that. What he did was, he took the Roman days that were already in error and added so-called biblical days. Like the first day, the second day, the third day, and then the Sabbath, which he put the Sabbath on Saturday. you know, but that's not the day of the Lord, you know, but he put those names on there to get rid of the pagan, but the calendar was still in error, you know. So you can't take the lunar calendar and jam it into the Julian calendar / Gregorian calendar. It's not going to work. They're two different systems, as we've been telling you before. So I have information here. This is from a book called The Role of St. Martin of Braga in the Development of Ecclesiastical Attitudes Towards Alternative Religious Beliefs and Practices in 6th Century Gaul and Northern Iberia. Because remember, this guy, Martin of Braga, he's the one that changed the Roman names, and all he did was add biblical names. Like when I mean by biblical names, I mean the first day of the week, the second day of the week, the third day of the week. He made the Saturday the Sabbath, you know, because Constantine had made Sunday the day of worship, you know, because he was worshiping the sun. So this guy put the Sabbath on Saturday, you know. So basically that's totally off. But because just calculating off of how the Julian calendar was established, the days were already messed up. So they weren't following the pattern of the way you calculate days, hours, minutes, seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years, according to the scriptures. All right, so I'm just going to read some excerpts off of here, you know, just to give you an idea of this guy, Martin of Braga, and how he changed that. And that's why today you have these clowns that say that Saturday appears in the Bible if you study, like Mike the Hamite, which he's all totally bugged out. Now, which he was totally bugged out, but now he's really went off the deep end. All right, so I'm just going to try to read some of this quickly so we can get to some scriptures and end the lesson. It says, Martin's tolerant attitude. Martin is said to stand out from all other Gallo-Iberian bishops, both his predecessors and his contemporaries, in that he did not espouse the use of violent means of correction against those who stray from orthodox rules of practice and behavior, while other bishops such as Caesarius of Arles, 470 to 542, advanced more or less severe physical punishment for those who practice idolatry. Martin maintained that transgressions of this sort were the result of ignorance and should be corrected by education. Martin never appeals to his own not inconsiderable temporal authority. He never threatens his readers with punishment or excommunication. His readers are left to reflect upon his words and then to act accordingly. This is some of the sources. If you brothers want to post this up, you can go to the sources if you want to get deeper into it. Ferreiro attributes Martin's tolerant and compassionate attitude toward the ignorance and rebelliousness of his flock to the study of the classics, an activity which as well shall we shall later see. Many of his fellow churchmen shunned entirely because much of the literature involved was pagan providence, and they were all using that. They were using pagan, which went back to Israel, because they were using pagan practices within the scriptures anyway. No, like the time when Pontius Pilate told the Jews that he was to release to them at the feast one, out of the two. That's not in the scriptures. That's something that went back to Babylonian customs. You had two prisoners, one was let go and the other one was crucified. Martin's that's pagan, and they were keeping them pagan customs even at this time. Martin's toleration, however, was certainly not without its limits. In the Correctionary Rusticorum and several of his other works, he unhesitatingly condemns as pagan and anti-Christian many ritual and festive practices. On the other hand, his attitude toward pagan high culture is quite different, as demonstrated by the writings to the educated correspondents in his letter. This is on page 29. Now I'm going to jump to page 31. Let us now turn our attention to the examination of Martin's De Correctionem Rusticorum, reforming the rustics, and to a lesser degree the Capitula Martini. These are the only two of his few surviving works that bear directly upon our subject. According to Ferreiro, Martin of Braga presided over the Second Council of Braga and provided its lengthy postscripts, the Capitula Martini, although a bishop named Lecrucius officially presided over the First Council of Braga. Ferreiro states that there is little doubt that Martin was the primary force that made such a gathering possible. The first canon of Second Braga requires the bishops to warn people against the practice of idolatry and other serious crimes such as murder, adultery, and perjury, and many of the canons in Martin's Capitulus condemned idolatrous practices as well. According to McKenna, the structure of De Correctione Rusticorum closely follows the details of Martin's Capitula, and this information will help shape our believe this is now, let me see, that was 29, 31. All right, this is page 35. We're jumping around a little bit in here. It says fire, deep water, and spring of water. Let me see something. Hold on. Shape our. All right, it says fire, deep water, and springs of water, stating that reverence shown to these natural forces implies mistakenly, in his view, that they had not been created by the Most High for the use of man, but had sprung up as gods from themselves. In other words, these different things that they were worshiping, they weren't gods. They were created by the Most High, as stated in the Book of Wisdom of Solomon, the 13th chapter, where these people worship the things that are seen, but they don't worship the Creator that created them. All right, it says chapter 7 describes the shameful details in the lives of the Roman deities, expanding on the common patristic traditions of euhemerism. In chapter 8, Martin claims that the demonic fallen angels of Christians' tradition had taken on the names of the Roman deities, and then persuaded the ignorant rustics to build temples, altars, and statues in their honor. These same demons now presided over the sea or streams or fountains of forests, and even had the days of the week named after them. See, these different deities had the names named after them, days of the week. And you even had the days of the month named after these Roman gods and goddesses, and also certain Roman people. Chapter 9 returns to Genesis, listing the daily divine accomplishments during the 7 days of creation as a way of demonstrating why the days of the week should honor the Christian God rather than demons in the guise of reprobate Roman deities. So see, this guy basically what he did, he just took the Roman calendar and added numbered the days of the Romans according to the days of the scriptures, but those days were off. You know, now whether his intentions were noble or not, you know, it remains to be seen. But the thing about it was he was in error because he was following the calendar that was set up by the Romans and not the calendar, the Hebrew calendar, because by this time the Hebrew calendar was basically banned. You know, when you go back to the time of Constantius, which I believe that was Constantine's son. The calendar, the Hebrew calendar was banned. You know, they couldn't use it anymore. You know, so it says furthermore, Martin recommends that the first day of the week, being the day on which Christ rose, he says Christ here, the Messiah rose, should honor him. Excuse me. In fact, the first day of the week became the Christian Sabbath as early as the Didache. The Sabbath was referred, because remember, when you go back during the time of Constantine, he made so-called Sunday the day of the Lord. All right. The Sabbath was transferred from Saturday to Sunday in honor of the resurrection at about the same time that the Jewish fast days of Tuesday and Thursday were translated to Wednesday, the betrayal, and Friday, the crucifixion. Furthermore, until shortly before the Christian era, the entire emphasis of the traditional Roman liturgical calendar had been upon days of the month and the Ides, the calends, etc. Okay, so basically what they did was they switched days around, and they placed the name of the Sabbath on Saturday. Then they switched it around and did it to Sunday. But basically, when you go back, like you say, you go back to these calendars when they were created, the calendars were totally off. So they were off in adding those days into that particular calendar. because it doesn't fit. It's a totally different calculation for that particular year than it is for a Hebrew year. It says the Romans, having only begun to make use of planetary names for the days of the week in, this is page 36, known among the Christians as Dies Dominica, Feria Segunda. Dies Dominica is Sunday. All right, Feria Segunda was just the second day, etc. You know, so that's how they calculated their days, with Sabbatum for Saturday, and that's when they started putting that term Sabbath for Saturday. You know, because this clown, matter of fact, before I read on, I'm gonna read on and I'm gonna go down. This clown, Mike Gina, which now he's totally bugged out. He's saying the laws are done away with. When his whole thing was trying to get at us about the law, now his thing is the law is done away with. He put a comment on one of the videos. I believe it was probably one of my videos or some other video. He says Saturday is in the Bible if you study hard enough, study some more. So he's basically referring to Sabbatum, you know, which is a Greek way of saying the Sabbath, but that's a modern use for the name for the day or for Saturday. That's a modern term use, because when you go back to the beginning, it was what? It was Saturn's day. It was a day of Saturn. It wasn't the Sabbath day. That's something that they put on later in the history, because they were trying to add the biblical names to or biblical days to the Julian calendar. All right. And matter of fact, before I read on, now I'm gonna finish reading this, and then I'm gonna go to the other point. It says, but the Roman planetary names for the days of the week had come into general Christian currency by late in the 3rd century. See, in a like manner, chapter 10 criticizes the ignorant rustics for believing that the calends of January marked the beginning of the year. According to Martin, since the Most High began creation by dividing the light from the darkness, this division must have been exactly equal, and thus the vernal equinox, when day and night are of the same length, should be taken as the beginning of the year, since the Most High subsequently divided the light into unequal parts, creating the sun and the moon. It seems more likely that Martin's argument was based on other concerns which were more traditional than scriptural in provenance. So now I just want to go down here real quick to this scripture here. This is the book of Acts 20:7. It says, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. So basically, reason why I went here, because when you look in the scriptures in the Greek, when you look up the word Sabbath in the Greek, it says Sabbaton, right? But then here, when you look up the word week in the in the Greek, the word is Sabbaton, which doesn't mean a Sabbath in this case. Right, it says the 7th day of each week, which was a sacred festival on which the Israelites were required to abstain from all work. The institution of the Sabbath, the law for keeping holy every 7th day of the week, a single Sabbath, Sabbath day, 7 days a week. So this word Sabbaton basically means week. You know, in this case, it doesn't mean the Sabbath. You know, because each week had 7 days. But now when you go back to the Julian calendar, when they first started that Roman calendar, it was an 8-day week. So everything was totally off. You know, so they didn't have the right day set up, you know, the right day set up to be able to calculate a real calendar, which goes back to the Hebrew calendar. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to go here to Sirach 43. The point is in verse 6, but I'm going to start at the top. The pride of the height, the clear firmament, the beauty of heaven, with its glorious show. The sun when it appeared, declaring at his rising a marvelous instrument, the works of the Most High. At noon it parted the country, and who can abide the burning heat thereof? A man blowing a furnace is in works of heat, but the sun burneth the mountains 3 times more, breathing out fiery vapors and sending forth bright beams. It dimmeth the eyes. Great is the Lord that made it, and at his commandment runneth hastily. He made the moon also to serve in her seasons for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. So the Lord made the moon to serve in her season for a declaration of times. Why? Because the moon is what dictates the times. Why? Because the day starts in the evening. Now the brother Manatazakba I believe he did a lesson on this, or it was either him or another brother I was watching. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was the brother down in DC. You know, the brother Manat Zakba, he read this scripture in one of his videos. But the brother down in DC, Salaki brother, I can't remember your name right now. The brother down in DC, he did a video on this, and he went into this particular scripture. You know, and as he was reading it, you know, my mind focused on verse 6, where it says, he made the moon also to serve in a season for a declaration of times. So a declaration of times, because the moon was what dictated a day, because a day started in the night. The evening and the morning were the first day. All right. So now when you look up this word here, times, when you go back to the Latin, et luna in omnibus in tempore suo ostensio temporis et signum aevi. So the word temporis is for the word time, as we read here. You know, where is it? Verse 6. For declaration of times. So now when you look up that word temporis, the word tempus is a portion of time, period, season, interval. Why? Because the moon is what governs the moon is what governs the moon is what governs the cycle of days, weeks, months, years. It begins with the rising of the moon, and then when the sun comes up, that's that first day, and it goes all the way until the sun goes down and the next moon comes up, and then that's the second day. That's how you calculate days. So that's how you calculate days, weeks, months, and years, by the moon. Everything starts with the moon. It says, so now I looked up some of these words, like the word time, right? The word time, the indefinite continued progress of existence and events in the past, present, and future, regarded as a whole. A point of time as measured in hours and minutes past midnight or noon. All right. Then I looked up the next word, which was period. And the word period, a length or portion of time. A punctuation mark used at the end of a sentence belonging to the characteristics of a past historical time, especially in style of design. So it's basically a length of or portion of time. Then the next word was season. So I looked at the word season. Each of the 4 divisions of the year, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, marked by particular weather patterns and daylight hours resulting from the Earth's changing position with regard to the sun. So basically, when you look up all these words, is letting you know basically that the moon is what governs everything. You know, it governs the times. So then I looked up the word interval, and the word interval is, it says, an interval, time, or space. A pause, a break in activity. It says, after his departure, there was an interval of many years without any meeting. So basically, it's a process of time, you know, because you could either have minutes, you could have seconds, minutes, hours, or you could have days, weeks, months, and years. And the moon governs each and every one of those. But the reason why you can't follow this Julian calendar is simple. Job 17:12. They change the night into day. The light is short because of darkness. So these devils changed everything. So you can't, we keep telling you, and we've read this. Before I even read any of this information, we already been saying that you can't take the Hebrew calendar and jam it into the Gregorian calendar. It's not going to work. There's 2 different sources. There's 2 different types of calculations. The sooner you get that Julian calendar out of your mind, the sooner you'll be able to understand the real Hebrew calendar, which is a luni solar calendar, based off the moon first and then the sun. Because the moon is what dictates the beginning of a day. The moon is what dictates the beginning of the year. The moon is what dictates the beginning of a week. The moon is what dictates the 7-day week, and all of that. All right. Okay, so I read that. And this is the last scripture I'm going to read, because basically the reason why you guys follow that is because you rather follow the traditions that are already set, because a lot of you are too lazy to do any research. So you rather just follow what especially Nate's guys, they rather follow that tradition. Why? Because Nate taught them not to look up Greek words, not to look up Hebrew words. Just stick to the English, stick to the English. So basically that makes your mind weak. It makes your mind lazy, you know. Then you won't be able to grow because you have to go into these different languages to get the understanding of these scriptures. You know, because if you never went into these different scriptures, you would think that, oh well, man, Friday is in the Bible. The word parasque, that's Friday. That's the modern use of the Latin for Friday. You know, and it's not so. When you do the research, you understand what that means. Then when you look up the word Sabbaton, which is a modern use for Saturday, you would be confused. But if you go and you did the research, you understand that these things were inserted later to try and fit the scriptures into that Julian calendar, to try to take away that pagan element out of the scriptures. But they already had that pagan element in many other parts of the scriptures that they were following. Mark 7:1. Then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes which came from Jerusalem. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands oft, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. See, they were holding the tradition of the elders. They didn't care about the Most High's laws. And that same thing with Nate. You know, they'll say that they care about the laws, but then when you look at their actions, they stay different. And when they come from the market, except they wash, they eat not. And many other things there be, which they have received to hold, as the washing of cups and pots, brazen vessels, and of tables. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, Why walk not thy disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? He answered and said unto them, Well hath Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And that's you see that today. Nate and his men and others. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men, because they following Saturday as a Sabbath. That's the commandments of men, because that Saturday is off. It was off when it was created and is off now. For laying aside the commandment of the Most High, you hold the tradition of men, as a washing of pots and cups and many other such like things you do. And keeping Saturday as a Sabbath, that's part of the commandment or tradition of men. And he said unto them, Full well you reject the commandment of the Most High, that you may keep your own tradition. And when you go through the scriptures, it's plain that the new moon is a Sabbath. It's plain that the new moon is the beginning of the month. It's plain that the new moon is the first day of the month. And it's plain that the new moon governs governs the weeks and governs the month. You know, and it sets the precedence for the Sabbaths. Because when you go back to the feast, to the high holy days and the feast, it shows you in there that every time you go and look through the scriptures on the Sabbath, it always falls on the 15th, the 22nd, in that interval. You know, when you look in, all you gotta do is look at the feast days. Then the brother in DC, he brought out a scripture which we had brought out a while back, but you know we haven't gone over it in a while. And I was thinking about going into it, but the Spirit had him get it in the book of Exodus, the 16th chapter, where it says on the 15th day of the second month, that was actually a Sabbath. And how do you know it was a Sabbath? Because when you read further into the chapter, it tells you that the Lord told Moses to tell the children of Israel to prepare 6 days to gather, you know, their food, and on the 6th day they gathered twice as much. And then it said that that very next day was a Sabbath, which if you calculate 7 days from 15, that would have been the 22nd day. Once again, the first day is a Sabbath, which is a new moon. The 8th day, because you do 6 days of work, and the 7th is a Sabbath, that'll be the 8th. Then another 7 days will be what? The 15th. Another 7 days what? The 22nd. Another 7 days what? The 29th. And around that time, that's when the new moon was coming in again, which is another Sabbath, which is the beginning of the month. It's very simple using the scriptures, but these guys are not going to get it. But you know what? That's of no concern to us. Our job is just to feed the elect, you know, as Elder Gabar always says in his lessons, you know. And with that, you know, I hope you brothers have been edified. And to the next time, I say shalom.